Master this, and you'll never again be angry or bothered by anyone or anything. Sounds impossible. It's not. That's the quiet, immovable power of Stoicism. Picture this, a life where no rude comment, no lie, not even blatant disrespect can rattle your peace. A life where you walk through the noise and chaos of the world with such deep calm. People begin to wonder, do they know something I don't? You still hear the insults. You still witness the drama. But it no longer enters your bloodstream. It touches you, but it doesn't move you. But let's be honest, how often have you let one careless word ruin your whole day? How many nights have you stared at the ceiling, replaying that argument, getting angry all over again long after the moment passed? Most people don't live in peace. They live in reaction. They don't control their emotions control them. One insult, one rejection, one look and their entire mood shifts. Not because the world is that powerful, but because no one ever taught them how to take that power back. Here's the truth. What Stoic philosophers knew centuries ago, what modern neuroscience now confirms is this. You can become emotionally untouchable, not cold, not numb, untouchable. Like a mountain in the middle of a storm. The wind howls, the rain crashes, but the mountain doesn't move. That's the inner strength we're about to unlock. And once you get it, truly get it, you'll stop being thrown off by someone's bad mood. You'll stop shrinking every time you're misunderstood. You'll stop reacting and start ruling yourself. This isn't just about staying calm. This is about emotional sovereignty. Real Stoic power, the kind Marcus Aurelius wielded. Not just to look wise, but to survive the crushing weight of an empire without losing his soul. So stay with me. What we're about to dive into will reshape how you see other people, how you handle emotional triggers, and most importantly, how you master yourself. And hey, if you find value in this space, the clarity, the calm, the practical tools to live unshaken, do me one small favor. Hit the subscribe button. It's free, it helps, and it keeps this kind of content alive. Now here's your first shift in perception. It's not them. It was never them. That's the trap most people fall into. You think it's what they said, the tone they used, the eye roll, the dismissal. But that's only the surface. What really hurts is what it awakens inside of you. Something deeper, something older, something you haven't made conscious yet. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Every time you blame others for how you feel, you hand over the keys to your emotional car, and then you wonder why you're always being driven into chaos. But here's the truth. Nobody can make you feel anything without your participation. Anger, resentment, frustration, they don't come from other people. They come from your response. And that response, it's shaped by the unresolved parts of yourself you've been avoiding for years. Think about it. Two people can hear the exact same insult. So, what makes two people respond so differently to the same insult? That's where the real story begins. One person brushes it off like dust on a jacket. The other, they stew in it for days, replay it, refeel it. But the insult didn't change. The only thing that changed was what it collided with on the inside. We're not really reacting to what someone said or did. We're reacting to what it awakens within us. Old wounds, hidden expectations, unquestioned beliefs, and more often than not, it's not even about that moment. It's about what that moment brings back, echoes from the past. When someone ignores you, and you suddenly feel invisible. That pain didn't start in that instant. It's a repetition, a reflection. Maybe it's mirroring all those times you felt unseen growing up, times you were overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. That's the real source of the ache. Not the person in front of you, but the shadow behind you. And when someone criticizes you, and you instantly snap or explode, that anger wasn't born from their words. It came from something much deeper, a need to defend a part of your identity you've worked tirelessly to protect. Maybe being seen as competent, capable, strong, or kind is so central to how you define yourself that even the slightest crack in that image feels like everything's crumbling. That's the real battlefield, not the co-worker, not your partner, not some stranger on the internet. The real conflict, it's what's unfolding within you. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But self-knowledge isn't just knowing your favorite food or your life goals. It's understanding the places inside you that still hurt, the parts that still seek approval, the pieces that believe peace can only come if everyone treats you just right. But here's where everything begins to shift. You are not your reaction. You are not your anger. You are not your pain. You are the one witnessing all of it. You are the awareness beneath it all. And the more you connect to that awareness, the less you'll demand the outside world to behave perfectly so you can feel okay. This doesn't mean you need to tolerate disrespect. It means your inner peace is no longer held hostage by whether it's there or not. And that is freedom on a whole different level. Because most people, they're not truly living. They're just reacting. One text ruins their entire morning. One online comment derails their whole mental state. One dirty look, and they're spiraling into self-doubt. That's not life. That's surviving on emotional autopilot. But you can't step off that ride, and it begins the moment you stop making them the villain in your story. The moment you stop saying, "They made me feel this way," and start asking, "What inside me responded to that?" That's when everything starts to change. That's when you reclaim your power. You begin asking better questions. Not, "Why are they like this?" but, "Why does this affect me so deeply?" Not, "Why are they so rude?" but, "What am I holding onto that makes me so reactive?" That question, "What am I holding onto?" is where most of your answers live. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." And conquering yourself, it's not about stuffing down your emotions. It's about understanding where they come from and deciding whether they still deserve control over you. It's about noticing the moment when your pride wants to fight, when your ego wants to prove itself right, and choosing not to be led by that impulse. This isn't passivity. This is power. The power to pause, to feel a wave of emotion rise, and not let it dictate your next move. That kind of strength, it's not something you're born with. It's something you train like a muscle, through discipline, through presence, And the people who trigger you the most, they just might be your greatest teachers. Not because they're wise, but because they reveal exactly where you're still holding on, where you're still raw, where your sense of self still depends on being treated a certain way to feel valid. But here's the shift: when you use those moments as mirrors, not battlefields, that's where growth begins. That's the difference between reacting and evolving. Socrates once said, "Let him who would move the world first move himself." And that movement, it doesn't begin with changing your environment. It begins with changing how you see yourself. It starts by watching your own patterns more clearly, becoming aware of the silent stories you tell yourself when life doesn't go your way, the assumptions you make, the roles you unconsciously step into, the truths you've clung to without ever really questioning them. When you believe someone should treat you better and they don't, that gap between expectation and reality, that's where suffering is born. But when you accept that people act based on who they are, not who you are, you stop tying your emotional state to their behavior. You become unshakable, because your peace is no longer reactive. It's rooted, grounded, independent. You don't get offended as easily. You don't chase after apologies. You stop needing everyone to understand you, to agree with you, or to even like you, because you know who you are, and that self-knowing becomes your anchor. Even in the storm, even when someone disrespects you, even when life feels painfully unfair, because you've stopped trying to control what was never yours to control. You've stopped outsourcing your peace to people who are just as lost, just as reactive as you once were. You've stopped expecting the world to reflect your worth back to you, because now you carry it within. And that's what Stoicism has always been about. Epictetus taught that we should only concern ourselves with what's within our control, our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs. Everything else, what people say, how they behave, how they treat us, that's all external. And if your calm is anchored to the external, you'll never be steady. But if you rest it in the internal, nothing can move you. That's the invitation Stoicism offers, to move through life with grace. Not because life is gentle, but because you are grounded. To face criticism, rejection, misunderstanding, and remain clear, not numb, not shut down, but strong, centered, awake. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, let it pass through. Don't deny the reaction. Just don't identify with it. Watch it rise. Watch it fall. Let it be what it is, a ripple, not a wave. And if it still gets to you, if the sting lingers, if the thoughts come back late at night, good. That's not failure. That's the doorway. That's the moment where you lean in and say, "Oh, this is where the real work begins." Because the goal isn't to become emotionless. The goal is to become emotionally free, not controlled by impulse, not ruled by pride, but aware, intentional, unbothered. Not because you avoid life, but because you face it so deeply, it no longer has power over you. And when you live from that place, people notice. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. The steadiness, the calm, the quiet energy that says, "You can bring me chaos, but you won't pull me into it." That's not arrogance. That's mastery. And if you've made it this far, there's a reason. Some part of you knows it's time to stop handing your peace over to people who don't even know what to do with their own. Some part of you knows your calm is far too precious to keep trading for validation, approval, or control. You weren't meant to give your calm away, not when you finally understand how it was conditioned out of you in the first place. You weren't born knowing how to react to rejection. You didn't enter this world with a rule book that said, when someone disrespects you, flare up. When they ignore you, shrink. When they criticize you, defend your pride like it's life or death. No, those reactions, the quick flashes of anger, the knee-jerk defensiveness, the burning need to prove something, anything, they were all learned, passed down, modeled, absorbed like second-hand smoke. You didn't write the script. You just started playing the role. And that's what makes this whole realization so powerful, because most of what you think is you, your temperament, your emotional triggers, the way you shut down or explode under pressure isn't really you. It's conditioning. It's habit. It's programming that began long before you were conscious it was happening. Somewhere along the way, maybe someone told you, directly or subtly, that being ignored meant you were invisible. That being challenged meant you had to fight back. That being wrong meant you weren't good enough. These beliefs, they're like hidden code running quietly in the background of your life. Unseen, unchecked, powerful, and until you bring them into the light, they'll keep steering your reactions. Without your consent, Carl Jung said it best, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So that emotional outburst, that spiral of overthinking, that moment where you shut down completely after someone's offhand remark, that's not destiny. That's not your personality. That's programming. And programming, it can be rewritten. But here's the catch. You can't change a script you don't even know you're acting out. So the work begins right here. You become the observer, not the actor. You step back. You pause. You ask yourself, what part of me is speaking right now? That one question, when asked honestly, opens the door to everything. Because the moment you feel triggered, the moment someone sets off a fire inside you, it's tempting to believe that fire is righteous, that your anger is truth, that your pain is proof. But strong emotion doesn't always equal wisdom. Most of the time, it just means the old script got activated again. And when you keep reliving the same emotional loops, with different people in different situations, you begin to notice something strange. The actors change, but the storyline, it's always the same. That's the giveaway. It's not about them. It's about what they awaken. And most people, they never stop long enough to trace the fire back to the original spark. They don't examine the reaction. They just assume it's valid because it feels real. But intensity doesn't guarantee accuracy. Just because you feel it deeply doesn't mean it's rooted in clarity. When you start to unpack those emotional reactions, you often find that beneath the surface isn't strength. It's fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being heard. Fear of not being enough. The script says, if I'm criticized, I must defend. But what if you didn't? What if you simply listened, filtered, and chose your response, not from fear, but from presence. That is authorship. That's what it means to take the pen back. It doesn't mean you stop feeling anger, sadness, or discomfort. It means you stop reacting from a place of unconscious programming. You begin responding with clarity, with awareness, because in that sacred space between trigger and reaction, that's where your freedom lives. Viktor Frankl, a man who endured unspeakable suffering, put it this way: between stimulus and response, between those two, there is a space, and in that space lies our greatest power, the power to choose our response. And in that choice lies our growth, our strength, and ultimately our freedom. Now just imagine how different life starts to feel when you stop reacting from that old, outdated script. Someone interrupts you mid-sentence, and instead of rushing to reclaim your voice, you pause, you breathe, you respond, maybe calmly, or maybe not at all. Not because you're weak, but because you've realized something powerful. Not every moment deserves your energy. You've stopped auditioning for approval from people who don't even hold the power to validate you. That shift may seem subtle, but it's actually transformational. It's the moment you move from being emotionally controlled to becoming emotionally in control. Not controlled in a robotic, cold, emotionless way. Controlled as in present, conscious, grounded. When you no longer feel the compulsive need to prove yourself, to win, or to be right just to feel okay inside. You've already won something far more valuable than any argument could ever offer. You begin to notice something magical. The scripts that used to run your life, they start losing their grip. The desperate need for approval begins to fade. The fear of being misunderstood softens its hold. The reflex to mirror someone's aggression with your own, it dissolves. You realize you don't have to reflect the chaos around you. You can be the calm, the steady presence that reminds others there's another way to live. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." He wasn't talking about dominance. He was talking about discipline, self-awareness, that quiet strength of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need to shout it at the world. Because when you're still running the old scripts, it's not just your emotions that suffer. It's your relationships, your peace, your untapped potential. So ask yourself, how many doors have you slammed shut simply because you reacted too quickly? How many meaningful connections have you damaged because your old story said, "If they don't respect me immediately, cut them off"? That story may have once protected you, but now it's probably just keeping you small. Taking authorship of your reactions means this: you are no longer a puppet of your past pain. You begin recognizing your emotional patterns. You feel the heat rise in your chest, and instead of lashing out, you pause. You sit with it, and then you ask, what would my highest self do in this moment? And then you do that, even if it's hard, especially when it's hard. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And if that sounds a bit heavy, flip it. The examined life, that's where peace lives. That's where real transformation begins. That's where you stop being at the mercy of every trigger, and you start building something rare in this world: sovereignty over your inner world. That's not something anyone hands to you. That's something you claim with effort, with awareness, with commitment. Yes, it takes work. Yes, it can feel uncomfortable. Because watching yourself honestly isn't always fun. But neither is staying trapped in the same loops of reactivity, restlessness, and resentment. When you stop reacting from the script, you finally start writing something new. You stop being the echo of every harsh word you've ever heard. You stop playing roles assigned by fear, ego, or childhood defense mechanisms. You start living from choice, from authorship, from truth. And people around you, they'll feel the shift. They'll notice that you don't flinch the way you used to. That sarcasm and passive aggression don't bait you anymore. That you no longer need to win every conversation just to feel whole. You'll stop chasing closure from people who don't even know how to give it to themselves. You'll stop needing every misunderstanding to be perfectly explained or corrected. Perfectly understanding you, you'll always be at war with the world. But what if you simply chose peace over performance? Sometimes you'll just let it go, not because you lost, not because you're backing down, but because you've finally realized peace is more valuable than proving a point. That right there, that's emotional authorship. That's real power. And here's what's even more beautiful. When you begin to live this way, your presence becomes medicine for yourself and for everyone around you. You start giving people permission to slow down, to reflect, to drop their guard. Because your stillness, it's a signal, a quiet invitation that maybe, just maybe, they don't have to keep playing the same exhausting roles either. So the next time you feel triggered, remember this. That first rush of emotion, that surge, that punch in the chest, that's not you. That's the script, and you don't have to follow it. You can pause. You can breathe. You can reclaim the pen and write something better. And every time you do, you become less of a puppet and more of a presence. Less of a reaction, and more of a response. That right there is the path to peace. Because the only thing you ever truly control is how you choose to show up. Not what they say, not what they do, just you, your awareness, your choices, your script. And if you've come this far, if something in you is stirring, waking up, resonating in a way you didn't expect, it's not by accident. You were meant to hear this. You didn't lose control when they said those words. You lost it the moment you took them personally. That split second when your chest tightened, your jaw clenched, and your mind started spinning with comebacks and judgments. That was the real surrender. The moment you got offended, you handed over your power. And most of us do it without even realizing. Not because we're weak, but because we've been trained to believe offense is a natural, automatic response. Someone insults you, you feel wounded. Someone disagrees with you, you feel threatened. Someone misunderstands you, and suddenly you feel invisible. But what if that pain, that sting, that emotional drop wasn't something that happened to you, but something you allowed? We live in a world where offense is currency. It's how people bond, how they get attention, how they define themselves by what makes them angry. But when everything offends you, you're no longer responding to reality. You're reacting to a fragile self-image, one that needs constant protection and validation. And that is exhausting. Aristotle once said, anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way that is not within everybody's power. He was pointing to something most people overlook. Real emotional power isn't in the reaction. It's in the restraint, the discernment, the ability to choose what truly deserves your energy. Because here's the truth. Offense is not objective. What wounds you might not even register for someone else. It's not the event. It's your interpretation. It's the story your mind starts spinning the moment something uncomfortable happens. They're disrespecting me. They don't value me. They're trying to hurt me. And the second that narrative locks in, your nervous system reacts as if it's the gospel truth. But offense isn't an alarm. It's a mirror. It reflects back the parts of your identity that are still fragile, still unhealed. That's where your real work lives. Not in silencing the world around you, but in strengthening the world within you. Because when your sense of worth depends on everyone treating you perfectly, then your sense of peace is always walking a tightrope. One sharp word, one misunderstanding, one offhand comment, and suddenly your inner calm disappears. But what makes someone truly unbothered isn't emotional numbness. It's clarity. It's knowing, deep in your bones, that your value doesn't rise or fall with someone else's opinion. It's knowing you don't need everyone to get you. You don't need every comment to be kind. You don't need constant agreement or applause. What you do need is to stop volunteering your power to people who haven't earned the right to hold it. Because here's the thing. That power, it's not something they take from you. It's something you give away willingly every time you let someone else's words control your mood. Every time you shrink down or flare up just to defend an identity. Every time you let offense define the moment instead of your principles. And the more often that happens, the more you train your brain to look for disrespect, to search for betrayal, to expect injustice, even when it's not actually there. Plato warned us long ago. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. And this is exactly that. We become afraid of the light, of truth, of growth, of responsibility. Because if we admit we're responsible for how we feel, then we can no longer blame the world. And that truth. It's uncomfortable at first, but it's also the most freeing realization of all. Because if you're not responsible for your emotional reactions, you're just a puppet tied to the strings of everyone else's behavior. But if you are responsible, then everything changes. You realize you have choices. You can pause. You can breathe. You can reflect. You can refrain. You can ask better questions. In the heat of the moment. Instead of why are they like this, you begin asking, why does this hit me so hard? Instead of how dare they, you begin asking, what part of me is still craving this kind of validation? That level of honesty might sting at first, but it's liberating. Because it puts the focus back where it belongs, your inner world. You stop seeing offense as injury. You start seeing it as insight, as feedback, as a signal that something in you is still tender, still seeking approval, still trying to prove its worth. And when you can look at that directly, without flinching, without blaming, without running, that's when real growth begins. Socrates once said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." Getting offended is often just that, fighting the old stories, old beliefs, old defenses. But when you stop feeding that loop, you make room to build something stronger, a new default, one built on quiet confidence, deep composure, and grounded strength. You stop reacting from your wounds, and you begin responding from your values. You become harder to provoke, not because you're colder, but because you're wiser. Because now you know the difference. You know the difference between what's actually harmful and what's just uncomfortable, between disrespect and misunderstanding, between real threats and imagined ones. And the moment you realize you don't have to respond to every challenge is the moment you step into a deeper kind of freedom. And no, that freedom isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's about not letting them walk inside your mind without permission. Let's say someone insults you. You hear it, you feel it, but you don't react. You don't internalize it. You watch it like a passing car. It's there. It's there. You see it, but it doesn't hit you. That's not detachment. That's self-respect. You respect yourself enough not to let a few careless words rewrite the entire story of who you are. And when you start living from that place, your entire energy shifts. You stop needing to prove yourself in every conversation. You stop getting pulled into battles that aren't worth the cost. You stop throwing away your peace like it's disposable. And people, they feel it. They may not say a word, but they sense the difference, the groundedness, the quiet confidence, the emotional weight, that calm, inner presence that says, "I'm not here to be triggered. I'm here to be free." Because freedom, true freedom, isn't just about time or money or lifestyle. It's about emotional sovereignty. It's knowing, without question, that you are the one in charge of how you feel. Not the world, not the crowd, not the algorithm, not the stranger in the comments section. You. And yes, sometimes it's hard, especially when the insult feels personal. When it touches something you already feared might be true. That's when offense feels the most justified. But paradoxically, that's also when the greatest opportunity for growth appears. Because it invites you to ask the hard question, is this something I already believe about myself? If the answer is why yes, then that's where your inner work begins. And if the answer is no, then let it go. Either way, you win. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That single quote, if you take it seriously, can change your life. Because it shifts your entire focus from blame to clarity, from defensiveness to depth, from being a victim of every encounter to becoming the master of your inner experience. This doesn't mean you won't feel things. You will. You're human. You're supposed to feel. But feeling something doesn't mean you have to act on it. And that right there is where your power lives. In the sacred space between the emotion and the action. In the choice to pause, to breathe instead of explode, to listen instead of argue, to let the moment pass without turning it into a storm. So next time you feel the sting of offense rising, remember, this is a fork in the road. You can give your power away, or you can keep it. You can replay their insult 100 times in your head, losing sleep, peace, and clarity. Or you can recognize it for what it is, a passing thought from someone who may not even understand themselves, because in the end, what offends you often says more about you than it does about them. It reveals the edges of your ego, the cracks in your confidence, the places where you're still not fully at peace with who you are. And when you begin to heal those places, the world changes. It stops feeling so loud, so hostile, so threatening. You begin to move differently, speak differently, think differently. You no longer walk into rooms braced for impact. You walk in already whole. This is about knowing you don't have to be offended to stand strong. You don't have to feel attacked to draw boundaries. And when you finally stop giving your power away, it becomes yours again, fully, quietly, permanently. Because when someone lashes out, mocks you, or treats you cold for no clear reason, your first instinct might still be to take it personally. To think, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm not enough. That's what we were taught. If someone's upset, it must be our fault. If someone's distant, we must have failed. But here's the truth, the deeper truth. They're not attacking you. They're bleeding on you. That sarcasm, that glare, that anger, it's not a weapon aimed at your identity. It's not a weapon. It's a symptom of something unhealed in them. Pain has a way of leaking out. Sometimes it explodes, loud and dramatic. Sometimes it festers, quiet and invisible. But it always finds a way to show up, and often it lands on the people who just happen to be nearby. You weren't the cause. You were just standing there when it spilled over. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." And what he meant is this: the more you understand your own wounds, your own emotional history, the easier it becomes to see that other people, they're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to survive themselves. And sometimes survival doesn't look graceful. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like control. Sometimes it even looks like cruelty. But in nearly every case, it's just pain wearing a different mask. Think about how you behave when you're hurting. Are you always patient, clear, kind, open? Probably not, especially when you're overwhelmed, scared, or grieving something you haven't even put into words yet. And that's not because you're a bad person. It's because pain narrows the mind. It collapses empathy. It turns the heart inward. And that's what's happening inside them, too. But here's where so many people get stuck. They believe that recognizing someone's pain means excusing their behavior. It doesn't. You can still set boundaries. You can still say, "This is not okay." But now, you say it with clarity, not confusion. You set the line without tying their pain to your worth. Because when someone disrespects you, the real danger isn't just what they said or did. It's what your mind does with it. The story that starts writing itself. They ignored me. so I must not be valuable. They yelled at me, so maybe I deserved it. Those quiet conclusions, that's where the real damage lives. But when you remember deeply that their behavior is about them, not you, everything shifts. You stop absorbing their energy. You stop carrying it like emotional luggage. You stop replaying the moment on an endless loop through your conversations, your self-image, your sleep. You see it for what it is, misplaced, misdirected, misunderstood, but not yours to carry. Socrates once said, "People are not angry at you. They are angry at themselves for not being able to manage you." That's a humbling idea, because what feels like an attack is often just someone reacting to their own lack of control, their own inner chaos. Your calm, your confidence, your silence. It reminds them of what they haven't resolved yet. And sometimes, that's enough to trigger them. It's not your job to fix them, but it is your responsibility to not internalize it. Because the moment you let their bleeding define you, you stop living your truth. You become a mirror for their wounds. You start reacting instead of responding. You match their tone. You absorb their dysfunction. And little by little, without realizing it, you join the cycle of pain, too. But there's another way. A way where you don't have to fight back. A way where you don't have to shrink. A way where you just stand in your strength and say, "I see what this is, and it's not mine." That's not indifference. That's mastery, the kind of deep, quiet mastery that can only come when you realize your self-worth does not rise or fall with someone else's emotional weather. Plato once wrote, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." He didn't say everyone deserves your energy, but he reminded us most people are carrying, and most of the time, it's something invisible. An old betrayal, a deep-rooted fear, a relentless voice in their head that never, ever lets them rest. And when that internal pressure builds, it erupts, often onto the wrong person, often at the wrong time, often without any conscious awareness. But that doesn't mean you should tolerate mistreatment. It simply means you no longer confuse it with truth. This is how you hold your ground. You recognize the pain. You honor your boundary, but you don't take the insult into your bloodstream. You don't allow someone else's storm to rewrite your identity. You just let it pass. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to not need their validation. And when you live from that space long enough, something remarkable starts to happen. You begin seeing patterns that were once completely invisible. You start noticing how often people lash out right after being hurt. How quickly coldness follows insecurity. How silence is often a mask for rejection anxiety. Suddenly, the behavior that once confused you, even wounded you, becomes easier to read. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start seeing, "Oh, this is what's still unresolved in them." That shift is subtle, but it's everything. It's the difference between spending hours trying to fix yourself to earn someone's affection, and spending those same hours returning to your own peace. It's the difference between reacting with fire and responding with clarity. It's the difference between making someone else's pain your burden and letting it stay where it belongs. But let's not romanticize this. It's not easy, especially when the words cut deep. especially when they come from someone you trusted, someone you loved. In those moments, yes, it's normal to feel shaken. And that's okay. You're not a robot. You're not here to be immune. But you are here to be aware. To notice the sting, to witness the reaction, and then gently remind yourself, this pain is theirs, not mine. Because the moment you internalize it, you begin to own it. You make it part of your identity. And once it's in there, it becomes harder to shake. You carry it into the next conversation, the next relationship, the next version of yourself. And without realizing it, your reflection begins to form, not from truth, but from wounds that were never yours to begin with. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The same is true for peace and presence and emotional sovereignty. It's not a one-time revelation. It's a daily discipline, a quiet choice to return to your center again and again. To see things clearly, to feel the emotion without becoming it. So next time someone is sharp with you, try this. Pause. Take one breath, then say, silently but firmly, "This is their storm, not mine." You don't need to fix it. You don't need to understand it. You just need to know it's not a reflection of you. And if that simple awareness helps even once, if it saves your peace for just one day, then it's worth it. Because the people who bleed on you, they may never fully understand the damage of their words, but you do. And that awareness, that gives you something rare. The ability to stop the cycle, to end the transfer of pain, to feel what's happening around you, without letting it redefine what's happening within you. So when the world gets loud, when the comments get sharp, when the people around you forget their worth and try to throw that confusion at, you stay rooted, not defensive, not dismissive, just steady. No one tells you this when you're young, but some of the deepest emotional pain you'll carry won't come from what people do. It'll come from what you should have known better. But the truth is, you expected them to act according to a script they never auditioned for. That sting you carry, that disappointment that lingers in your chest, that tension you replay in your head long after midnight, it's usually not about the words they said, or even the silence that followed. It's about the invisible contract you were holding onto. The one that said, "If I'm kind, they'll respect me. If I show up, they'll value me. If I'm honest, they'll never hurt me." But here's the truth. No one else signed that contract. Only you did. And when reality doesn't follow your script, it feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal. It's life. Simply being life. It's people imperfect, unpredictable, just being human. It's you slowly waking up to the fact that your expectations were never promises. They were unspoken demands the world never agreed to. Aristotle once said, "Hope is a waking dream, but unexamined expectations, they're more like sleeping traps, hidden beneath your feet, waiting to snap. You walk right into them, thinking, the world owes me kindness. People will love me how I love them. Fairness is a rule, not a hope. And when those expectations collapse, it doesn't just hurt. It shatters a version of reality you thought was secure. What we often don't realize is this. Most of our emotional pain is self-authored, not on purpose, not with blame, but through the constant, quiet construction of inner agreements we never spoke aloud. We do it with friends, with lovers, with family, even with strangers. We carry this unconscious formula. If I do this, then I should get that. But life doesn't work like a vending machine. You don't insert kindness and automatically receive appreciation. You don't give your best and always receive fairness. People don't follow rules they didn't even know existed. And that's where the heartbreak comes from. When someone forgets to acknowledge your effort, it hurts. Not because the moment was so cruel, but because of what you expected to get back. When you open up vulnerably and someone withdraws, it burns, not because you were wrong to share, but because you assumed they'd hold space for you. We're not just hurt by what happens. We're hurt by what we thought should have happened instead. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But I'd argue that the most freeing thing is to accept others completely too. Not as we hoped they'd be, not as we imagined they would behave, but as they actually are. Because the moment you stop expecting people to behave like the fantasy versions of themselves you created in your head, you finally let reality breathe. And in that breath comes peace. Now, this doesn't mean lowering your standards. It doesn't mean tolerating abuse or giving up on accountability. It means learning the difference between a value and an expectation. A value is how you choose to live. An expectation is how you think others should live in return. One gives you power, the other quietly drains it. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools, because they have to say something." And in this same spirit, wise people give because it's who they are, not because they're trying to manipulate an outcome. When you remove the hidden strings from your actions, you stop using love as leverage. You start doing things from a place of integrity, not transaction. From a place of wholeness, not expectation. And that is rare. And that is powerful. So think back. How many times have you felt let down by someone who didn't even know they were performing? Someone you quietly placed on a stage, handed them a role, and expected them to play it. You expected them to say the right thing, to show up when it mattered, to see your effort, your vulnerability, and respond with the same care you gave. But maybe they weren't trying to hurt you. Maybe they were just being themselves, imperfect, unaware, or operating from their own silent, unspoken scripts. And maybe, just maybe, the deepest pain didn't come from what they did, but from what you expected them to do, and never questioned until it was already too late. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." That includes knowing how someone should respond, what they should feel, what they should be capable of in any given moment. The truth is, most of us barely understand ourselves. We're still deciphering our own hearts. So expecting others to meet us at the exact emotional frequency we've silently hoped for, that's a guaranteed recipe for suffering. But what if you started giving without needing something in return? What if you loved people for who they are, not who you hope they'll become? What if you made kindness your baseline, not your bargaining chip? That's not weakness. That's emotional freedom. Because the moment you release yourself from those invisible emotional contracts, those quiet, unspoken agreements where you believed effort should equal reward, you begin to see people and situations with radical clarity. You respond based on your values, not your resentments. You stop punishing people for failing to fulfill roles they never knew they were cast in. Of course, it's not easy at first. The ego loves to keep score. I did this, so why didn't they do that? But the soul doesn't keep ledgers. The soul gives. The soul forgives. The soul moves on. Not because it wants to avoid pain, but because it knows clinging to invisible contracts only leads to bitterness. And bitterness? It's like drinking poison and hoping someone else gets sick. Let it go. Write a new kind of contract. One that involves you and you alone. One that says, I will speak honestly. I will show up fully. I will act with integrity. Not because I expect applause or loyalty in return, but because that's who I've chosen to be. That is where real strength begins. That's where disappointment stops being your master. Because disappointment, it rarely comes from others. It comes from your story about them. Carl Jung said it best. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And what irritates us most? When people don't act how we imagined they should. When reality doesn't match the emotional contract we were secretly holding. But instead of using that mismatch as fuel for frustration, use it as fuel for growth. Ask yourself, what was I expecting? Why did I expect that? Was that fair? Realistic? Voiced? Sometimes it's not about lowering your expectations. It's about letting go of the hidden ones, the ones you never said out loud. The ones you didn't even know were silently steering the show. And once those dissolve, something beautiful takes their place. Gratitude. You begin to appreciate people for what they do bring, not just what they don't. You start to see life not as a contract with guaranteed returns, but as a spontaneous, unpredictable offering. And strangely enough, when you stop expecting so much from others, they often show up more sincerely, because there's no pressure, no silent scorekeeping, no invisible emotional weight they can feel but never understand. You're just free. And if you've ever wondered why life feels so heavy sometimes, it's not always because of what's happening. It's often because of what you expected to happen. And now what do you do with all that heaviness? You let it go. Because most of the pain you carry, it isn't from what the world has done to you. It's from who you think you have to be in it. The person you believe you are, or more accurately, the person you think you're supposed to be, is often the very source of your offense. Your rejection, your overwhelm, that identity, the image you've been sculpting and defending for years, isn't just how you see yourself. It's a contract, a silent contract your ego wrote behind your back. It's filled with rules you never consciously agreed to, and yet you follow them every single day. Rules like, if I'm smart, I can't be wrong. If I'm kind, people must treat me gently. If I'm successful, I should be respected by everyone. These rules are invisible, but you feel them every time someone hits a nerve. Every time you're questioned, interrupted, underestimated, or simply not seen the way you see yourself, and something inside tightens. It's not just discomfort, it's fear. Fear that this identity you've built so carefully is being challenged. And if it breaks, you're left wondering, what's underneath? Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." But how did you conquer something you haven't taken the time to understand? Most people don't realize that the image they're defending so fiercely isn't who they truly are. It's a mask, a persona, a structure of beliefs built from experience, repetition, and the need to emotionally survive. It's not wrong, it's not evil, but it's fragile, and that's the problem. You suffer every time the world doesn't match the script written by that image. If someone calls you lazy, and you see yourself as relentlessly hardworking, the sting isn't in their words, it's in the clash. If someone ignores you, and you pride yourself on being important or worthy, the pain isn't in the silence. It's in what the silence implies about your value. Your identity resists anything that contradicts its narrative. And when it resists, it creates conflict, first inside, then outside. Carl Jung once said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." That includes ourselves. But acceptance isn't weakness. It's not surrender. It's not passivity. It's a kind of courage, a willingness to look at the parts of you that were built on fear, approval, or pressure and ask them to soften, to loosen. It's being willing to question what you thought was fixed. Because when you ask, "Who am I?" really most people respond with roles, labels, and titles. I'm a good person. I'm a leader. I'm not someone who gets disrespected. But many of these identities aren't built to express who we are. They're built to protect us from who we fear being. So we grip tightly. We guard. We perform. And the tighter we hold, the more fragile we become. What if your identity contract didn't need defending? What if you didn't need to be seen as right, or strong, or unbothered all the time? What if you could just be, without explanation, without apology, without the exhausting mental gymnastics of constantly proving who you are? Socrates reminded us, the unexamined life is not worth living. And when you stop to examine your emotional patterns, what you often discover is this: pain follows protection. The more you protect a rigid identity, the more vulnerable you are to anything that threatens it. And that's not confidence. That's prison, because in that state, your peace depends on how people perceive you, how they speak to you, whether they get you or not. But freedom is knowing who you are at your core, beyond the still holding onto. Because true peace doesn't come from who the world thinks you are. It comes from who you've allowed yourself to become. It doesn't come from the job title, or the compliments, or the carefully curated reputation. It comes from being secure in your character. Even when someone questions your behavior, it's being grounded in your values. Even when someone misinterprets your actions, it's the quiet knowing that you don't have to be seen as perfect in order to be whole. Aristotle believed knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But knowing yourself means more than being aware of your preferences or writing down your life goals in a journal. It means being brave enough to dismantle the identity you've been protecting. If that identity is costing you your peace, it means asking yourself, is this version of me helping me grow? Or is it just keeping me safe? Safe from judgment, safe from rejection, safe from ever having to admit, I'm still learning, I'm still evolving, I'm still unfinished. And when you finally let go of that identity contract, something surprising begins to happen. You become less reactive. You stop taking every disagreement as a personal attack. You no longer need every conversation to affirm your worth. You don't feel the urge to correct every misunderstanding. You stop chasing lost perceptions like they're life rafts. You simply let people think what they think. Because you know who you are, and that knowing no longer needs defending. But here's the paradox. The ego will try to convince you that defending your image is strength. That appearing certain, composed, unshakable, is the goal. But real strength, it's humility. It's being able to say, yes, I used to believe that. I've changed. Or even, maybe I was wrong. Or the most powerful of all, I don't need to convince you. That's not weakness. That's liberation. Because now, your identity isn't rigid. It breathes. It adapts. It evolves. It doesn't collapse every time someone pushes back. Think about how much energy you've spent just trying to manage your image. How many words you've used to explain yourself. How many sleepless moments you've lost replaying that comment, that conversation, just because someone didn't see you the way you wanted to be seen. That's not living. That's reacting. And reaction is always rooted in fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if the image cracks, you'll fall apart. But you won't, because you are not the image. You are the awareness behind it. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you were told to be. Not who you think you need to be. Not even who they praise you for being. Who you truly are. The version of you that remains when the labels fall off, when the performance ends, when the pressure fades. That version of you. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need explanation. It simply is steady, present, real. And when you begin living from that place, you become untouchable in a whole new way. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing defines you. Without your permission, you're no longer chained to reactions. You respond with clarity, with wholeness, with depth. That's why the version of you that you've been clinging to might just be the root of your suffering. Because as long as your peace depends on defending that identity, you'll always feel unsafe. You'll keep chasing approval, dodging criticism, trying to stay within the tight lines of a self-image that maybe once protected you, but now only limits you. So tear up the contract. You don't need to be the smartest in the room, or the most agreeable, or the most respected. You just need to be honest with yourself about what you're still. Let the world respond, however it will, because you're no longer bending who you are to earn love, respect, or belonging. You've stopped clinging to the version of yourself that believed worth had to be earned. And once you can admit that, you're already free, because now you're not driven by image. You're guided by truth, your truth. The one that doesn't require performance or perfection, just presence. At some point in your life, you learned to wear a mask. Not a literal one, but the invisible kind. The smile when you were hurting, the silence when you wanted to scream, the confidence that hid your insecurity. It didn't happen all at once. Maybe it started slowly. Maybe you shrank your truth in a relationship because peace felt safer than honesty. Maybe you buried your pain because you didn't want to be seen as dramatic. Maybe you overachieved, overexplained, overcompensated, just to feel like you were finally enough. That mask, it wasn't evil. It was survival. It was your way of navigating a world that doesn't always reward authenticity. But over time, the mask stopped being a tool and started becoming your identity. You forgot where it ended and where you began. And now, you're tired, exhausted, not because you're weak, but because living out of alignment is one of the heaviest things a person can carry. Every interaction becomes a calculation. Every conversation a performance. Every room a stage where you're subtly adjusting your volume, editing your truth, softening your edges so you can be more palatable. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But before you can become that person, you have to let go of who you're still pretending to be. The version of yourself built to impress, to protect, to please. That version may have earned you applause. It may have kept you liked. But it never brought you peace, because deep down, you always knew they weren't loving you. They were loving the mask. And that's where the quiet suffering begins. Because pretending is a kind of betrayal. A soft betrayal, a subtle one, but a betrayal nonetheless. Every time you silence your truth to be accepted, a piece of your soul pays the price. Every time you laugh at something that hurts, downplay your needs, or act unaffected while you're breaking inside, the gap between who you are and who you present widens. Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." But knowing yourself, that's not surface level. It requires looking at the parts of you you've hidden, not just from others, but from yourself. It means asking the uncomfortable questions. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I believe? When I stop trying to be agreeable, what do I actually want beyond what's expected? And those answers, they might shake you. They might unravel the persona you've spent years constructing. But what's waiting on the other side is infinitely more real, more peaceful, more you. Because when you burn the mask, you stop negotiating for belonging. You stop earning your worth through performance. You stop fearing being misunderstood. Because finally, you understand yourself. Aristotle once said, "Happiness belongs to the self-sufficient." And self-sufficiency, it's not just about money or independence. It's about emotional sovereignty. It's the ability to show up as you are, without the need to apologize, explain, or shrink. It's the quiet power of be yourself, and let the world respond however it will. Some people will draw closer, some will walk away. But either way, for the first time, you're finally being seen, not for the role you've played. Not for the reputation you've curated, but for the soul beneath it all. There's a kind of freedom that only arrives when you stop protecting the mask, and it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, steady, rooted. It looks like speaking. Honestly, even when your voice shakes, It looks like choosing peace over perfection. It looks like walking into a room without feeling the need to prove your value to everyone in it. And no, this doesn't mean abandoning growth. It means growing from a place of truth, not pressure. It means developing not to become worthy, but because you already are. You're not chasing wholeness anymore. You're coming back to it. And people, they feel the shift. They can sense when someone's not performing, but present. When you live without a mask, your presence becomes magnetic. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're real. There's a quiet strength in that, a peace that doesn't need to be explained. The world might not always reward it, but your soul will. Carl Jung also reminded us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But if you can do that, if you can look at your fears, your flaws, your raw desires, without turning away, then the mask falls off on its own. Because now, you're not just done hiding from the world, you're finally done hiding from yourself. Most people walk through life hoping it will be smooth, predictable, safe. They say things like, "I just want peace. I can't handle another problem right now." As if life is going to ask for their permission. As if chaos knocks before it enters. But life doesn't wait. Storms don't check your calendar. The question is never if chaos will come. It's how you'll handle it when it does. That's the difference between being reactive and being ready. Emotional resilience. It's not built in calm moments. It's built before the storm, in silence, in discipline, through something the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. The idea was simple, but powerful. Visualize what could go wrong before it does. Not to live in fear, not to attract suffering, but to rehearse your response. To train your mind for impact before impact hits. Most people don't do this. They walk through life with quiet, unspoken assumptions. Today will go smoothly. People will be kind. Nothing will go wrong. So when someone's rude, when a plan falls apart, when emotions run high, they collapse. Not because the moment was unbearable, but because they were never mentally prepared for it. And what you don't prepare for will end up owning you. Now imagine this, starting your day with just 2 minutes of premeditation. You pause, you breathe, and you think, today, I might be ignored, someone might disappoint me, I might feel triggered. Then, in your mind, you walk through those moments calmly. You picture the eye roll, you feel the tension, and you practice your response. Not to fight, not to freeze, but to breathe. You choose silence. You remain grounded. You watch it pass. In that quiet mental space, you're building muscle, not physical strength, but emotional strength, and like any muscle, it grows through resistance. The Stoics weren't pessimists. They weren't obsessed with pain. They were wise enough to not with panic, but with presence. Not with resistance, but with readiness. The Stoics understood this deeply, that the best way to stay calm in a storm is to expect the heat and rehearse staying cool inside it. Aristotle once said, "We become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts." But how do you start acting brave if you've never practiced bravery? This is where the mind comes in, because your brain doesn't actually know the difference between vivid imagination and lived experience. That's why athletes mentally rehearse every movement. So do performers, soldiers, surgeons. So why not? Why not rehearse your emotional strength before the pressure hits? Because when you rehearse chaos before it finds you, you shift from being emotionally fragile to becoming emotionally trained. You stop depending on circumstances to keep you centered. You start relying on inner conditioning. And the training, it's simpler than you think. Visualize the hard thing. Visualize yourself facing it with clarity and grace. Think about how powerful that becomes over time. Someone interrupts you during a meeting. In the past, your heart would spike. Your pride would lash out. Your voice would rise without warning. But now, you've seen this moment before. You've trained for this. So instead, you pause. You breathe. You hold your ground without needing to raise your voice. You let the moment pass without letting it define you. That pause? That's not luck. That's the product of rehearsal. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Mental premeditation is how you flip that equation. You shine a light on your triggers. Before they pull you under, you say, "I see you coming." And because you've already practiced your piece, you don't have to build it in the middle of the storm. This isn't about becoming anxious or paranoid. It's about becoming prepared, because life will bring discomfort. That's not a bug. It's part of the design. People will misunderstand you. Delays will happen. People you love will disappoint you. If you expect everything to be smooth, every bump feels like an insult. But if you've rehearsed the bumps, you glide over them. Not because they don't hurt, but because they don't shock you. Socrates once said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." Rehearsing discomfort isn't about reliving old wounds. It's about building new wiring in your mind, so that when stress arrives, you don't default to panic. You default to stillness. You become like a ship that doesn't sink when the waves come. Not because it's never faced a storm, but because it was built for it. That's what you're doing every time you mentally walk through a tough moment and train your reaction. Not to be perfect, but to be present. Not to control the world, but to stay in control of yourself. And here's what happens when you live this way. The world stops feeling so threatening. Not because it's changed, but because you have. You stop fearing people's opinions because you've already practiced not needing them. You stop dreading difficult conversations because you've already visualized staying grounded through them. You stop reacting to every inconvenience like it's personal because you've trained your mind to see it as a test, not an attack. Peace is not a gift. It's a practice. Strength is not a personality trait. It's a rehearsal. You don't become calm by accident. You become calm by choice, made over and over again in your thoughts before the moment arrives. So start small. Each morning, ask yourself, what could challenge me today? Who might frustrate me? What could go wrong? And then see yourself responding. He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have. And that wisdom, it speaks to one of the greatest sources of our suffering. Shock. Not just pain, not just betrayal, but the surprise of it. We expect loyalty. We expect kindness. We expect effort to be seen and returned. And when reality doesn't match the script we were holding silently in our heads, we don't just feel pain, we feel collapse. That's why your chest tightens when someone ghosts you. Why your breath shortens when a friend turns cold. It's not just the rejection, it's the disorientation, the fracture in the belief that said, this is how it was supposed to go. And that's where the wound deepens. Because it's not just heartbreak, it's the shattering of your inner map. Aristotle once said, the aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure, but to avoid pain. And while no one can avoid pain entirely, the wise avoid the shock of it, not through apathy, not through numbness, but through mental preparation. That's what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the rehearsal of adversity. A daily meditation. Who might disappoint me today? What expectations might be unmet? What outcomes might shift? They didn't ask these questions to become paranoid. They asked to become ready, because pain is part of life. But being shocked by pain? That's where most of the suffering lives. It's not the betrayal that breaks you. It's the story that betrayal wasn't possible. It's not the breakup that crushes you. It's the belief that they'd never leave. It's not the silence that hurts. It's the expectation that they should have shown up. That's why the Stoics didn't just strengthen their will. They strengthened their sight. They looked at life clearly, as unpredictable, imperfect, human, and in that clarity, they created cushion for impact. You may not see it, but you carry around invisible towers of glass, expectations you've silently stacked on top of people, circumstances, routines. And when life inevitably bumps into them, they shatter. And you call it heartbreak. But it wasn't just the bump. It was the blindness, because somewhere inside, you thought you were safe from disappointment. You thought that kindness earned consistency, that loyalty would always be returned, that your effort guaranteed acknowledgement. And when life turned left, without warning, you didn't just hurt. You fell apart. Not because you're weak, but because surprise feels like betrayal. Even when it's not. Even when no one meant to hurt you. Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. And we resist this truth, that people are unpredictable, that nothing is promised, that no amount of love or planning or effort can protect us from change. So we cling, not to life as it is, but to life as we imagined it would be. And when the fantasy dies, so does our sense of peace. But what if you loosened your grip? What if, instead of clinging to perfection, you built your inner world to bend? What if resilience wasn't hardening, but softening, not bracing for pain with fear, but preparing your mind with flexibility? That's not pessimism. That's presence. That's the kind of strength that doesn't flinch when people change. When plans unravel, when the world reminds you you're not in control, because now you've rehearsed it. You've walked through the fire in your mind. You felt the sting and trained yourself not to run, but to breathe. To meet the moment, not with fear, but with awareness. That is your mental gym. That's where true strength is built, not be contented with what he would like to have. That includes emotional expectations. If you demand constant ease, constant praise, constant alignment with your ideals, you're not seeking peace. You're building a life of emotional fragility. Because in that life, every deviation becomes devastation. But when you begin to expect that pain is not a punishment, but a part of the path, not an interruption, but a teacher, your posture shifts. You stop reacting like a victim and start responding like a student. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" The shock fades. The sting still lands, but it doesn't stay. And in its place, clarity rises. Clarity that whispers, "Yes, this hurts, but no, I'm not broken. I didn't expect this, but I'm ready anyway." And that's a powerful place to live from. It's not about predicting every twist. You can't. Life is too wild, too real, too human. But it is about changing your relationship to surprise, no longer fearing it, but flowing with it. Because when someone lets you down, you don't collapse. You were never standing on them in the first place. When plans fall apart, you bend. You never believed control was the source of your safety. When life swerves left, you breathe. Your strength has never lived in prediction. It lives in response. This mindset won't erase pain, but it will erase excess pain, the spiraling, the outrage, the disbelief. It lets you feel what's real without being devoured by what you imagined. Plato once said, "Reality is created by the mind." We can change our reality by changing our mind. And when you stop believing that life must always align with your hope and start accepting that it often won't, you stop being shaken every time it does in single quotes. You become grounded, prepared, present, and in that presence, peace begins to grow. So the next time life hits you sideways, ask yourself, is this pain real? Or is this just the sting of surprise? And if it's surprise, smile. You just found your edge. Now it's time to soften it. Anger doesn't always yell. Sometimes it simmers. Sometimes it explodes. Sometimes it looks like control. And sometimes collapse. But nearly every time, if you peel it back far enough, anger isn't about the principle. It's about the ego. That voice inside that hisses, "How dare they?" That internal defense lawyer who takes everything personally, who equates being challenged with being disrespected, who turns every disagreement into identity warfare. The truth, anger, especially the kind that hijacks you, isn't always noble. It's not always strength. It's often just pride, dressed in armor. We love to believe our anger is righteous. We say things like, "I'm just standing up for myself. I won't let them treat me like that." But peel that sentence open, and often what you find is not strength, but a fragile sense of self trying not to break. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That irritation, that heat rising up your neck, is a flare. But it's not from the world. It's from within. It marks the spot where you've tethered your worth to something unstable. Someone's tone, someone's opinion, someone's approval. And when that external thing shifts, your ego panics. It scrambles, it burns, and that fire becomes your reaction. Yes, anger can feel powerful. It can feel clear, even intoxicating, but it often isn't power. It's fear in disguise. Anger can feel like power, like something solid to hold when the world spins out of control. It wraps around you like armor, not because you're strong, but because beneath it, you're carrying something you'd rather not face: shame, insecurity, the fear of being unseen. So instead of asking, "Why does this hurt?" you say, "They shouldn't have done that." The pain redirects outward. The energy turns defensive. And the wound, it hides. Socrates said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." And an unexamined anger, that's a wildfire. It looks noble. It sounds honest. It pretends to be your truth. But left unchecked, anger becomes just another tool of the ego. It doesn't ask, "What's real?" It demands, "Who's right?" It doesn't seek peace. It seeks validation, control, a win. You felt it. That jolt when someone cuts you off mid-sentence. That heat when a friend criticizes you. That ache when you're misunderstood and your voice rises, ready to correct, to prove. But those reactions, they rarely come from clarity. They come from identity, that fragile inner contract whispering, "If I'm not seen this way, I'm not enough." Aristotle reminded us, anyone can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. That kind of anger, measured, conscious, wise, is rare, because most people never pause. They don't trace the spark back to its source. They just let it spill onto their loved ones, onto strangers, onto themselves. And then they live in the ruins: apologies, guilt, distance, regret. But what if you did pause? What if, in that heated moment, instead of defending your identity, you asked, "What part of me feels threatened right now?" That single question softens the fire. It exposes the ego. And once exposed, the ego loses its grip. Because the ego thrives in darkness, in your silence, in your reflexes, when you confuse volume with truth, when you mistake being loud for being clear. But when you shine awareness into the flame, anger becomes something else, not an attack, but a signal. This isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming conscious. So your anger doesn't destroy the very thing you were trying to protect. So you stop fighting to defend your image and start living from your essence. There's a difference. One is reactive, exhausting, always in fight mode. The other is grounded, calm, unshakable. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." When ego is in charge, you feel like you have to say something, to prove, to defend, to explain. But when you're rooted in truth, you speak only when it serves peace. And sometimes, you don't speak at all, not because you're weak, but because you're free. Here's the paradox. The less you act from ego, the more people feel your strength. You stop chasing validation. You radiate stability. You stop needing to win. You own your energy. People feel safe around you, not because you're passive, but because you're not volatile. You're calm. It's real. Unshakable. So when anger comes, and it will, don't shame it. Don't resist it. Just slow it down. Peel it back. Ask, what am I protecting right now? What belief about myself feels at risk? And then, breathe. Because that breath, that tiny moment of awareness, is where you take your power back. No. You won't always get it right. You'll snap sometimes, and that's okay. Growth isn't neat. It's not a perfect arc. But every time you choose reflection over reaction, you reclaim a little more of your power. You become less controlled by pride, more grounded in truth. Most people think power is volume. They think it's dominance, snappy comebacks, fast words. They think if you don't speak now, you've lost the moment. But real power, real, steady, anchored power, often looks like stillness, not because you don't have a response, but because you're strong enough to wait, because you've learned that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. In the space between reaction and response, there's a door. Most people rush past it. Someone says something, the emotion spikes, the mouth opens before the mind catches up. But if you can pause, if you can say nothing and feel everything, you step through that door, and on the other side, awareness. That's the space where you stop being run by emotion and start observing it. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That sacred pause, that quiet moment when you breathe instead of break, that's where it begins. That's where you catch the patterns, the defensiveness, the fear, the ego script. That's when you can finally ask, what's really going on in me right now? That one breath, it says more than 1,000 words ever could. It shows you your raw spots, your unhealed places, your truth, your values, your pride, the difference between a boundary and a performance. And it tells you something vital. Am I about to speak from clarity or from fear? We live in a world addicted to speed. Fast replies, instant takes, hot emotions. But wisdom doesn't rush. Truth doesn't shout. And the people most in control of themselves, they're not the loudest. They single quotes ray the ones who can hold the silence without needing to fill it. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But that kind of self-knowledge, it doesn't arrive in the heat of the storm. It comes in the pause, in the space where you choose not to retaliate just because something hurt. Because when you feel deeply, but don't immediately react, you begin to unlock something rare, discernment. You learn to tell the difference between pain and truth, between urgency and importance, between what needs to be said and what's better left unsaid. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to not defend yourself, not because you're giving up, but because you've stopped building your identity on being right. You'd rather be in alignment than be loud. You've outgrown the need to win every moment. Socrates said, the greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be. And we pretend to be strong. We pretend to be in control. But true strength, it's not in controlling others, it's in disciplining yourself, in holding your energy when everything inside you wants to erupt. in observing the chaos without becoming it. It's staying grounded even when your emotions beg you to speak. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you honor them. Feel them fully, but don't hand them the microphone. Because when you don't rush to react, you finally hear the full message your emotions are trying to send. And what you'll often find is that underneath that anger, there's something vulnerable, something still aching for space. The sadness, it's not weakness, it's longing, a whisper from within, reminding you of something still unmet. The anxiety, it's not madness, it's a compass pointing to the places where you're still trying to grip what you cannot control. And the gift, you can sit with all of it. No judgment, no shame, just presence. This is emotional sovereignty. The ability to respond with awareness instead of reacting from old programming. And here's the beautiful part. That pause, that sacred breath before the reply. It gets stronger every time you choose it. Every moment you decide to wait, to breathe, to feel without responding, you're building a new muscle. You're rewiring your nervous system. You're becoming the version of yourself that doesn't disappear in the storm, but stands calmly within it. Not because storms don't hurt, but because waves no longer sweep you away. Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." That pause, that stillness, it gives you the space to decide which one you're about to be. And if you wait long enough, if you let the emotion move through you fully, without resisting, without explaining, you'll notice something subtle and sacred. What felt like an emergency starts to feel like a lesson. What felt like injustice starts to feel like insight. What once demanded a reaction now simply asks for presence. Saying nothing doesn't mean doing nothing. It means choosing what comes next, instead of letting emotion choose for you. That's real freedom. The line between those who are owned by their reactions and those who own their response is drawn right there, in the pause. So next time you feel that emotional rise, pause. Say nothing. Feel everything. Let the silence show you who you are beneath the impulse. Let it teach you about your patterns, about your growth, about your inner landscape. Let the stillness speak louder than your ego, because your true power, it's not in what you say, it's in what you don't need to say. It's easy, so easy, to point the finger outward. They disrespected me, they triggered me, they made me feel small. The mind does it fast. Instant blame, instant reaction. Someone rolls their eyes, interrupts you, forgets your name, and suddenly your peace is gone. But what if the discomfort isn't actually about them? What if the mirror has never been facing outward? What if it's been turned inward the whole time? What if what you're reacting to isn't their behavior, but your own reflection? Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That irritation, that tension in your jaw, that heat behind your eyes, it's not a weapon. It's a flare pointing not to an enemy, but to a wound, unhealed, unseen, still asking for your attention. And if you're willing to look, really look, you'll see. You're not fighting them, you're fighting a story you've carried for years. A story that says, "I must be liked to be worthy. I must be right to be respected. If they don't choose me, I must not be enough. These stories live quietly inside you until someone bumps into them, often without meaning to. And in that moment, it's not their action alone that hurts. It's the echo it awakens. That's why two people can face the same slight. One shrugs, the other spirals. It's not the moment. It's the meaning beneath it, the filter, the history, the old wound that's still waiting for closure. Because being ignored, it doesn't just feel rude. It taps something older, something buried. Maybe a moment as a child when your voice didn't matter, when your presence felt invisible, when your truth got tucked away in silence. The pain isn't new. It's been waiting, dormant. And the person in front of you, they didn't create it. They just held up the mirror. But most people don't pause long enough to see that. They react. They lash out. They shove away the discomfort, instead of pulling it close and asking, why does this moment feel so sharp? The world starts to look like a minefield, full of potential threats. But in truth, the only thing being threatened is the idea of who you think you have to be. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But real self-knowledge, it isn't pleasant. It demands you stop blaming and start investigating. It asks you to look inward, not outward, to admit, it's not just what they did. It's what it touched in me. That shift. It's not comfortable, but it's the door. Because once you take ownership of your reaction, you reclaim your power. Not power over them, power over you. You stop being controlled by every glance, every offhand comment, every shift in tone. You still feel the sting. But now, instead of projecting it outward, you trace it inward. You investigate the story underneath. And that tracing, it leads you somewhere real. Maybe to an old belief that no longer serves. Maybe to a forgotten part of you still aching. Maybe to a younger version of yourself 10 years old, still quietly, wondering if they're enough. And suddenly, what felt like rejection becomes an invitation, not to defend, but to heal. Socrates said, the shortest and surest way to live with honor in this world is to be in reality what we would appear to be. And in reality, we're not always as calm as we pretend, not always as healed, not always unfazed. The mirror moments, the ones that provoke, reveal the unfinished work, not as failures, but as guidance. You don't need to be ashamed of your reactions. You just need to be curious about them. Sit with the discomfort. Ask, what part of me still believes this? Because once you see it, really see it, you can choose differently. Next time someone disrespects you, pause. Ask, what belief about myself is being triggered right now? Next time you're left out, don't spiral. Ask, why does this feel like abandonment? You'll start to see patterns, and then you stop reacting to the person. You start responding to the pain. That's where healing lives. Because when you realize the mirror is inside, you stop needing the world to fix itself for you to be okay. You stop needing perfect behavior from imperfect people just to feel whole. You no longer chase reassurance, agreement, validation. You understand the world will keep reflecting, and your only job is to keep looking. Plato said, The greatest wealth is to live content with little. That includes needing little from others to maintain your peace. When your stability comes from self-awareness, not external behavior, you become unshakable, resilient, present. And people notice. Not because you shout about your growth, but because you no longer react like someone desperate to control the narrative. You stop fighting shadows, stop chasing apologies. You let people be who they are, and you let those moments teach you about you. So the next time someone shows you something uncomfortable, don't just flinch and walk away. Don't rush to defend, correct, or control. Pause and ask, what is this showing me about me? Most people live trapped inside their own reactions. They hear a tone, see a glance, feel a subtle energy shift, and suddenly they're spiraling, defending, overthinking, absorbing someone else's chaos like it's their responsibility. But what if you pulled back? What if in the middle of the moment you didn't have to be the one experiencing it? What if you could simply watch, like you're not you for a second, like you're just observing the scene unfold from above. That shift? Subtle, but transformative. Because when you enter observer mode, you step out of the emotional fog and into clarity. You stop viewing the situation through the filter of your ego and start witnessing it like a calm, curious presence. The emotion is still there, but it no longer owns you. You're no longer the puppet of your nervous system. You're the one holding the strings. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." But there's a deeper level still. Who looks from above understands. Understands that not every moment deserves your reaction. That most people are just reenacting their own unresolved stories, habits, fears, and most of it has nothing to do with you. Imagine someone speaks to you with sarcasm. The old reflex is to match it, snap back, shut down. But in observer mode, you see their face, their body language, their tone, and instead of asking what's wrong with me, you quietly ask, what must they be carrying? You don't absorb, you observe. You're not cold, you're steady. You watch the interaction like you're watching a scene in a film. And then you realize you don't have to step into their storm. You don't have to get wet just because they're drowning. That's presence. Socrates once said, "He who is not a good servant will not be a good master." Before you master anything, communication, energy, relationships, you must learn to serve your own mind, to recognize when it's dragging you into a narrative that only hurts you. Observer mode isn't apathy, it's leadership. It says, I choose awareness over reaction. And the moment you choose to watch instead of fight, you regain your freedom. The tension's still there, but now you're studying it, learning from it, and that learning gives you choices. You can say less, you can stay still. You can move your energy instead of matching theirs. It's not about pretending to be unaffected. It's about remembering you don't have to be swept away just because someone else is sinking. Plato said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." But the greatest power isn't what you say. It's what you choose to withhold. The power to stay centered when someone tries to shake you. The power to let a moment breathe instead of trying to control it. The power to see the game without needing to win it. Most people don't have that power because they've never stepped out of the identity they're so busy defending. They've never watched themselves in the heat of the moment and asked, "Who am I being right now?" But the moment you start watching, you start changing, because you can't improve what you don't observe. And you can't observe if you're always immersed. So start small. The next time you feel yourself tightening, triggered, anxious, on edge, pause. Just for a moment. Now imagine you're not you. You're just watching someone named you in a scene. You're observing their tone, their posture, their racing thoughts. You're seeing what's rising inside them and what they choose to do with it. That tiny gap, the space between stimulus and response, that's the beginning of emotional sovereignty. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, the pause stretches longer, the breath deepens, the clarity sharpens. You begin to notice not just what you feel, but why you feel it. You trace the impulse back to its source, a fear, a wound, a script you didn't know you were following. And when you see it, you don't shame it, you don't suppress it, you just acknowledge it. And that is liberation. Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." That includes emotional thoughts. Just because something stirs in you doesn't mean it needs to be unleashed. Just because it feels urgent doesn't mean it's true. Observer mode teaches you how to feel fully without becoming what you feel. This is how you grow, not through force, but through awareness. You stop chasing control. You start cultivating presence. You stop needing everyone to act a certain way so you can feel okay. Instead, you trust yourself to stay grounded because you've trained for this. And once you've lived from that place, once you've tasted the quiet power of watching, instead of reacting, you won't want to go back. You start choosing peace, not because you fear conflict, but because you know what it costs to constantly live inside it. When someone disrespects you, the impulse is to strike. When they snap at you, ignore you, mock you, your pride rises, demanding justice. But what if I told you that the strongest counterpunch isn't anger or revenge? It's compassion, not the soft, sentimental kind. Not pity. True compassion, the kind that sees through the behavior and gently asks, what must they be carrying to act this way? That doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior. It doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It means you refuse to join them in their pain. You see it clearly. You don't absorb it. You don't mirror it. You rise above it. Because once you realize that cruelty isn't born from power but from suffering, you stop seeing enemies and start seeing wounds. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but it can also lead to an understanding of them." That bitterness in someone's tone, it didn't start with you. That coldness, that arrogance, it's usually a shield. Something they learned to wear a long time ago. Maybe when someone hurt them. Maybe when they decided they'd never be vulnerable again. Now, that wound has hardened into personality. You just happened to be there when it surfaced. But that doesn't mean it was ever truly about you. So the next time someone lashes out, ask yourself, Is this strength? Or is this pain wearing armor? That one question changes everything. You shift your posture. You reclaim your energy. You stop reacting and start observing. And in that observation, you create space. And in that space, you find your real power, the ability to choose the response that doesn't add fuel to the fire. Plato once said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." Yes, even the one you can't stand. Even the one who said that thing you still can't forget. Even the one who acted like you didn't matter at all. They're not exempt. Their pain may wear a different face. Their defenses might be sharper. But the battle is still there. And when you meet pain with pain, you don't resolve it. You multiply it. But when you meet it with clarity, with understanding, with compassion, you interrupt the pattern. You refuse to join their storm. You stay rooted. And that rattles people more than any insult ever could. Because compassion, true compassion, isn't weakness. It's restraint. It's power with a soft edge. It takes immense strength to hold back when your pride is aching to fight, to stay calm when your ego wants to speak, to soften when everything in you wants to harden. That is real power, because it's not control over them. It's control over you, over your impulses, your wounds, your need to win every exchange. Socrates said, "The shortest and surest way to live with honor is to be in reality what we would appear to be." We want to appear calm, wise, unshaken. But are we really? Most of the time, no. We're reactive. We want to win. We want to be right. We want to hurt back. But beneath all that fire is something quieter. The real desire to feel whole again. To remember that no one, not even the cruelest person, has the power to pull you out of yourself. And that's what compassion protects. It doesn't erase the hurt. It keeps you from becoming the hurt. You feel it. You breathe through it. And then you ask, what's the most powerful move I can make that won't cost me my peace? Sometimes that means saying less. Sometimes it means walking away. Sometimes it means responding with softness when sharpness would be easier. Not for them, for you. Because you're not here to play small emotional games. You're not here to let someone else's suffering decide who you become in a moment. You're here to master yourself. Aristotle once said, to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. But compassion isn't avoidance. It's presence. It's the highest form of emotional skill. Because it allows you to protect your energy without needing to prove your strength. You stop keeping score. You stop needing the last word. You stop taking everything personally. You begin to see people not just for how they act, but for what they carry. That shift changes everything. It turns the rude stranger into a soul having a rough day. The passive-aggressive co-worker into someone starving for recognition. The one who left you behind into someone who never learned how to stay. It doesn't erase your boundaries. It doesn't remove consequences. But it does remove the poison. And when the poison's gone, you move on faster. You sleep deeper. You don't replay that same argument 100 times in your head. You stop writing imaginary speeches in the shower. You're free, not because they changed, but because you did. Compassion is the ultimate counterpunch. It puts you back in control of your voice, of your energy, of your narrative. It reminds you that you don't have to be anyone's reflection. You can be your own light, and yet there's still a voice in you itching to correct them. You hear the lie they misunderstood, a subtle jab, a twist of your truth, and something in you tightens. You want to respond. You want to set the record straight. You want to say, "That's not what happened. That's not who I am." And it feels like if you don't speak, if you don't correct, you're agreeing, or worse, you're surrendering. But what if you let them be wrong and let it mean nothing? That's where peace begins. Most of us think being right equals strength, that when someone misjudges us, twists the story, frames the narrative, our job is to correct it. To stand up, to fight for truth at all costs. But often, the cost is much higher than we realize. Our time, our sleep, our energy, our peace. We trade calm for the illusion of clarity. We burn hours crafting explanations that never land where we hope they will. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that includes arguing over shadows, fixating on misunderstandings that don't actually affect your path, believing foolishly that if they just get it, you could finally rest. But peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself enough to know you don't need to be. We've all had moments where someone misrepresents us, tells the story with just enough spin to make them the hero, and you the villain, and instantly the mind activates, gathering receipts, rehearsing speeches, preparing the defense. But all of it springs from the same wound, the belief that your worth depends on their version of the story. It doesn't. Aristotle said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it." That applies to criticism, projection, opinions thrown carelessly your way. You can hear them, even hold them, and still not accept them, not out of fear, out of clarity. Letting someone be wrong about you is not weakness. It is strength in its quietest, most powerful form. It says, "I know who I am. I don't need your agreement to feel real." That doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you choose when and why. Not from pride, from purpose. You stop replying to bait. You stop explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. You stop chasing fairness in conversations that were never about truth in the first place. Socrates said, "Strong minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Weak minds discuss people." When you fight to correct every narrative, you risk becoming trapped in that last category, discussing people, including yourself, in ways that drain your soul. But when you rise above the need to be right, you rise, and from that height, the world gets lighter. You realize not everyone has to like you. Not every lie needs correcting. Sometimes the most powerful act is to nod, say nothing, and keep walking. Not from indifference, from discipline. Because now you know what peace costs, and you're no longer willing to trade it for the illusion of control. Let them think you're arrogant. Let them believe you were wrong. Let them twist the frame to comfort their story. You don't have to carry their version of you into your next chapter. You don't have to waste hours reshaping a story that was never yours to begin with. Plato once said, "Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance." And most of what people believe about you is just that, opinion, filtered through their wounds, their projections, their narrow lens. You don't need to argue with opinion. You don't need to defend your name in every room you've been whispered about. You just need to live your truth so fully, so freely, that your life becomes the answer. No speeches, no corrections, just alignment, just presence, just showing up again and again as yourself, no matter how loud the noise gets. Because if your peace depends on their agreement, you'll always be vulnerable. One comment, one misread tone, one Instagram post, and you're spiraling again. But if you can let them be wrong, and let it mean nothing, you walk through the world unshaken, not cold, not detached, just clear. The truth doesn't need to shout. Most people treat insults like fastballs thrown straight at the chest. They catch them instinctively, they grip them tightly, examine them, replay them, and carry them for hours, sometimes for years. But what if you didn't have to catch it at all? What if, when the sarcasm came, the judgment, the passive-aggressive swipe, you simply let it fall? No blocking, no dodging, just watching it pass by and hit the floor with a soft, powerless thud. That's the practice. Someone throws venom, words meant to pierce, and instead of reaching, you stay still. You don't absorb. You don't explain. You don't catch it. It floats past your field, lands behind you, like a dropped pebble, useless, empty, forgotten. You keep walking. It sounds simple, but it's not easy, because most of us, we don't get pierced by words alone. We get pierced by what we still believe might be true. That's why they stick. They latch onto old doubts, old wounds, and pull us into the spiral. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that includes your reactivity. Every time you catch an insult, you reveal a part of yourself still hungry for validation, still unsure of its own worth. But what if you saw the insult as just air, noise without weight, energy you are not obligated to carry? That's when the world softens, not because they stopped throwing, but because you stopped catching. It's not about being cold. It's about becoming unavailable for what doesn't serve you. Socrates once said, "When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser." Most insults aren't about you at all. They're projections, expressions of pain, powerlessness, or fear wearing a sharp disguise. So stop personalizing what was never yours to carry. Picture every conversation like a tennis match. They serve, but you don't always have to return the ball, especially when it's covered in venom. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Just stand still. Let it fly past. Let it fall. Let it die on the ground beneath your feet. Let the ball bounce. Let the insult fall. Let it dissolve into dust on the ground where it belongs. That stillness, that inner silence, isn't weakness. It's not passive. It's a declaration, a quiet refusal to let every low vibration pull you from your center. It's you saying, "My peace is not up for negotiation, not today." Aristotle said, "Anybody can become angry. That is easy. but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, that is not easy. So don't be quick to anger, be quick to observe. Be quick to remember, the insult isn't about you, unless you decide it is. And this is where visualization becomes power. When the words come, the tone, the jab, the rolled eyes, see them, actually see them, picture them like floating paper birds. You don't need to swat them. You don't need to catch them. You don't even need to read them. Just watch them flutter toward you and fall, unnoticed, unclaimed, weightless, and here's the quiet magic. The more you do this, the more your body and your nervous system learn to stop reacting, the more insults lose their sting. Not because you're numb, but because you're awake. Awake to your truth. Awake to what matters. Awake to the fact that your energy is too precious to be spent on shadows that don't belong to you. This is the practice, protecting your peace. In real time, becoming the mountain that doesn't move when the wind blows. Not because you're rigid, but because you're rooted. Rooted in the knowing that not every word deserves a reply. Not every opinion needs your engagement. Not every judgment must be corrected. Let people be who they are. Let them speak from their pain if they must. But don't pick it up. Don't catch it. Don't wear it. Let it fall. Most people say they want to be emotionally strong, but only in theory. They love the idea of being calm, of being unbothered, grounded, stoic. But then someone replies late, uses a condescending tone, cuts them off in traffic, and boom. That imagined strength, gone. They miss it. But they're throwing away the best opportunities life gives them to train. Because emotional strength is not built in comfort. It's built in those tiny, irritating moments. The micro-triggers. Like the body. You don't grow muscle by staying still. You grow it by leaning into resistance. Strain, effort, repetition. It doesn't feel great in the moment, but the discomfort is the signal. It's the path. And your emotional life works the same way. Your triggers, they are your dumbbells. Every time someone frustrates you, and you don't snap every time you feel the heat of jealousy, or the rise of anger, or the tension of fear, and you breathe through it instead of feeding it, you're retraining your reflexes. You're rewiring your mind. You're building emotional muscle where they're used to be panic, creating space where they're used to be impulse. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But it can also lead you to mastery if you let it. If you decide to treat life as a gym, and your reactions as the resistance you came here to overcome. Most people, they don't do that. They live in autopilot, triggered, react, regret, repeat. And they wonder why peace never stays. If you feel drained all the time, it's not because life is too hard. It's because you've never trained your emotional body. You're walking through life unconditioned, letting every bump, every turn, every delay knock you off rhythm. But once you start training with your triggers, everything changes. You stop taking things personally, not because you're numb, but because you've become precise. You feel the emotion rise. You name it. You breathe into it. You choose your next move on purpose. And that choice? That awareness, that quiet strength, that's freedom. Let's say someone cuts you off in traffic. Your heart jumps, your breath tightens. That moment, that's a rep. Not for your arms, for your awareness. You could honk, curse, spiral, or you could inhale. You could smile, you could remember. This is my training. That stranger, gone in seconds. But your reaction, that stays, that builds you. Now multiply that by 100 tiny moments a day. The co-worker who interrupts you, the message you waited for that never came, the slow Wi-Fi, the spilled coffee, the passive-aggressive comment. Representative rep. And with everyone, you get stronger. Not through force, but through conscious choice. Not by pretending you're above it, but by staying present right inside it. Socrates said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new." So don't waste time arguing with every trigger. Don't spiral over the fact that you got annoyed or lost your patience. Instead, ask, how can I use this? How is this the rep I needed today? Emotional mastery isn't about never being triggered. It's about using your triggers as training partners. That means you stop avoiding hard conversations. You stop ghosting uncomfortable situations. You stop blaming the world for not being easier, and instead, you get better at holding your center in the middle of it. Frustration. That's resistance you get to lift. Envy. That's a mirror, showing you unmet desires. What are they pointing to? What needs attention? Even sadness is part of the training. When you let yourself feel it without letting it run you, you build capacity. Emotional capacity. The ability to hold big feelings without losing your direction. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. That includes emotional excellence. You want to be calm under pressure? Practice. Calm when pressure shows up. You want to be patient. Then those daily annoyances, they're your arena. There's no magical transformation coming. No emotional reset button. There's only this, now. This moment, the choice to train again and again. And when you do, your nervous system rewires. You breathe deeper. Your reflex slows. Your presence expands. And you start to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Space. Space between stimulus and response. Space to choose something higher than your old pattern. Space to decide, moment by moment, who you're becoming. And that space, that's your evolution. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding discomfort, dodging triggers, escaping anything that pokes at their fragility. You're not here to avoid your wounds. You're here to grow through them. That means walking toward the tension, not with fear, but with purpose. Let your triggers teach you. Let them expose your edges. Let them shine a light on the parts of you still holding old beliefs, old insecurities, old reflexes. And each time that familiar spark rises, the pride, the panic, the urge to prove, pause. See it for what it is, a bell ringing at the start of a new set. Your next emotional rep, your moment to lift, your moment to choose, your moment to become who you say you are. This is emotional strength, not loud, not flashy, quiet, steady, invisible, because no one applauds when you pause instead of snapping. No one throws a parade when you stay silent instead of erupting. But those moments, those are the ones that count. Those are the moments that build the emotional body you need to carry everything else. So, train with your triggers. Life isn't punishing you, it's sculpting you. Now let's talk about speaking your truth. We're told, don't bottle it up. Don't let people walk over you. Express how you feel. Speak now, or it will fester. And yes, that's partially true. But it's not the whole truth. Because there's a kind of expression that doesn't liberate you. It leaks from you. It's not healing. It's harm, disguised as honesty. That's what happens when you speak from the wound, not the wisdom. From the ache, not the awareness. There's a time to speak, but there's also a time to wait. Not forever, just long enough to let the sting pass, let the noise settle, let the message find clarity instead of chaos, because what we say in pain often sounds nothing like what we mean in peace. Carl Jung said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. But here's the catch. You can't know your own darkness while it's still flaring. You can't meet your truth while your nervous system is flooded, while your ego is screaming for defense, for validation, for revenge. In that state, you're not speaking from your true self. You're speaking from your wound. And wounds? They don't speak with precision. They speak with reflex. They blame. They lash. They speak in ultimatums. They say things that can't be unsaid. That's why silence, at the right time, is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's strategy. It's restraint. It's what protects everything you've built from being burned in one impulsive breath. That moment when you want to say everything but choose to say nothing. That's where your real strength is forged. It's not hard to speak when emotions are high. It's hard to wait. It's hard to feel the fire and still sit in stillness. It's hard to feel the ache and not pass it on. But that's the practice. To feel deeply without reacting blindly. To let the inner storm pass before you bring anyone else into it. Socrates once said, the greatest way to live with honor is to be what we pretend to be. And many pretend to be strong by speaking first, by getting the last word, by dumping emotion without considering what it costs. But true strength sounds like this. I'm in pain, but I still choose not to hurt you. I'm angry, but I won't let that be the only voice in the room. I'm triggered, but I refuse to turn that into a weapon. That kind of silence. It's not avoidance. It's sacred. It gives you space to find your real truth, not the one shaped by heat, but the one shaped by healing. Let your voice be anchored not in heat, but in self-awareness. The kind of awareness that takes accountability, not just slings accusations. The kind that doesn't just demand to be heard, but seeks to honor the relationship you're speaking into. Because once you've begun to heal, even just a little, your words change. They stop sounding like explosions and start sounding like insight. You're no longer speaking to punish, you're speaking to connect, to build something stronger than the pain you carried. And here's the irony. Once you've done that inner work, you often realize you don't need to say half of what you thought you did. The emotional voltage is gone. The need to defend faded. The urgency to prove dissolved. What remains is calm, grounded clarity. From that place, you can speak with power that doesn't wound. You can express yourself without spilling unprocessed emotion on someone who didn't cause it. Aristotle once said, "Anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, and in the right way, that is not easy." And the same is true for every strong emotion. Because the words you speak, when you're triggered, they're not wisdom. They're just volume. And volume doesn't equal truth. It equals wounding. So how do you know you're not ready to speak? If you still want to win the conversation, you're not ready. If you're mentally drafting sentences meant to sting, you're not ready. If your throat tightens, your breath shortens, your mind races, you're not ready. Wait. Not forever. Just until clarity returns. Just until your truth is separate from your pain. Because once you're there, you speak with fewer words, but they land deeper. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to relive the whole story. You just name what's real, what matters, and what you've learned. And people, they feel the difference. They don't get defensive. They listen, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. You're not throwing your pain at them. You're offering understanding, even if they don't get it. Even if your truth lands on deaf ears, you can walk away with peace. Because you spoke from your healed self, not your hurt self. And that's worth more than any temporary satisfaction you'd get from letting it all out. So let the wound speak to you first. Let it show you where it still hurts. Where it still needs boundaries, needs softness, needs care. Tend to it. Then speak. Speak from the scar, not the cut. From the lesson, not the chaos. From love for yourself, not as a weapon against someone else. Because sometimes silence is strength. Not the kind that suppresses, but the kind that protects. Protects your peace, your dignity, your future. Even when the present feels like it's pressing hard on your chest. That kind of silence, no outburst can match it. Most people don't feel emotions. They become them. 1 second they're calm. The next, they're fury. A small comment, a late reply, a delayed plan, and suddenly they're lost in it. Not thinking, not observing, just reacting. The emotion becomes the lens. It distorts everything, and they forget the most important truth. You are not the emotion. You are the one watching it. That difference between being the storm and being the sky that holds it. That's where your power lives. To feel something and to observe it. That's the line between chaos and clarity. Between being dragged by every passing thought and standing still in the center of the storm. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will." Call it fate. And emotions, they are part of that unconscious tide. They rise without warning, flood your system. And unless you've trained yourself to notice, they'll use you. You become their puppet, your voice, your posture, your decisions, driven not by wisdom, but by the loudest, rawest feeling surging through your system. But here's the truth. Feelings are not facts. They're just visitors. They come. They speak. They leave. And if you can just pause for a single breath, you build space between you and the feeling. And in that space, you reclaim your role. You remember, I am not this anger. I am not this fear. I am not this ego that's screaming for defense. I am the observer, the one behind the thoughts, the one who can choose not to react. Socrates said, know thyself. But how can you know yourself if you're constantly merged with every mood that moves through? Self-knowledge begins with separation, not to disconnect, but to see, to observe the story your emotion is telling without blindly believing it. Take anger, for example. It feels urgent. It tells you someone crossed a line. It demands, do something now. But if you just wait a few seconds, don't move, don't speak, don't strike, you'll notice something. The anger isn't you. It's just energy, a flare from a threatened part of you, a defense mechanism. And if you don't obey it, immediately, it loses power. You feel it, but it doesn't control you. Fear works the same way. It creeps in with whispers of what if. It tightens the chest, spins disaster reels in your head. But the moment you say, there's fear, you create presence. You become the watcher. And the watcher, always calm. Because the watcher knows, no emotion lasts. They all pass, like clouds in the sky. And you are not the cloud. You are the sky. Aristotle once said, anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, that is not easy. What makes it possible? Disidentification. The ability to say, I feel anger rising, but I am not the anger. That one internal shift gives you back your power. And with power comes choice. And choice is what transforms reaction into response. This doesn't mean you suppress what you feel. No, you feel it deeply, but you don't become it. You don't build your identity on it. You let it flow through, not take root. Think of it like a fire alarm. The emotion is the alarm, loud, shrill, urgent. But you don't smash windows just because it's ringing. You check, is this smoke or fire? That's how you begin treating emotions. Not with compliance, but with curiosity. Every time you choose to observe instead of react, you grow stronger, more centered, more free. You stop walking through life as a slave to your moods. You become steady. People feel it, even in silence. They can feel your presence is different. Not so easily rattled, not so easily provoked. Not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've stopped letting feelings define you. Plato wrote, the first and best victory is to conquer self. And self-mastery, it's not force. It's not suppression. It's awareness. It's noticing the exact second emotion tries to seize the wheel and choosing, gently, silently, to keep your hands on it instead. This is not easy work. It takes practice. It takes discipline. It takes patience. But every time you disidentify, every time you watch instead of obey, you step closer to emotional sovereignty, the state where your peace no longer depends on perfect conditions. Because now you've separated yourself from the storm. You don't need the sky to be clear. You just need to remember, you are not the storm, not the rage, not the fear, not the ego trying to protect itself. You are the one watching, the quiet witness behind it all. And with that awareness, you gain the power to decide what comes next. The world won't suddenly become peaceful just because you've found your center. People will still interrupt you mid-sentence. They'll still gossip, misjudge, fail to say sorry, and choose ego over honesty. Life will still surprise you. Late nights, early calls, broken trust, sudden losses, sharp turns. The noise doesn't stop. The chaos doesn't dissolve. But you no longer shake, because the point was never to change the world. It was to change how you move through it. Most people live in a constant pinball game of emotional reactivity. They believe peace means the world must become softer, quieter, safer, more predictable. So they cling to people who agree, to outcomes they can control, to situations that won't sting. They think, if I can just manage everything outside me, I'll be okay. But what if you didn't need the sea to calm down? What if you just learned to stand still in the middle of it? Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And in this final arc, you become untouchable, not because nothing touches you, but because nothing owns you. You don't become the noise. You don't absorb every energy in the room. You don't swing wildly based on who texted, who left, who understood. You stay centered. You stay grounded. You stay quiet inside. That's the result of all the inner work, of watching, of stepping back, of detaching. You stop living like a reactor. You begin living like a responder. And the difference, it's everything. Reaction is fast. It's tight. It's driven by fear, pride, pain. Response is slow. It's conscious. It's rooted in presence, not panic. And from that place, the world shifts, not because it changed, but because you did. The insult that once stung now sounds like static. The rejection that once broke you now feels like divine redirection. You don't chase clarity anymore. You are clarity. You don't need to prove, to win, to correct. You don't even need the apology. You found closure in yourself. That is emotional freedom. Socrates said, to find yourself. Think for yourself, and to truly think for yourself, you must first see yourself, separate from the emotion, separate from the ego, separate from the storm. Because when you know who you are, no one else gets to tell you. And here's the part no one tells you. Even when you've mastered this, you still feel. You're not a robot. You're not numb. You still notice the betrayal, the sarcasm, the silence that stings. You still care. But the difference now is everything. You don't react from the wound. You respond from the wisdom that pain carved into you. That quiet power. It's in the way you breathe when others panic. In the way you choose stillness over shouting. In the way you walk away, not to escape, but because you no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. Plato said, the measure of a man is what he does with power. And the greatest power? It isn't dominance. It isn't control. It's restraint. It's discipline. It's staying centered when life pulls at your edges. You stop chasing closure. You stop repeating stories that drain you. You stop shrinking your peace to fit noisy rooms. You walk forward with less noise, more clarity. This is the final frame. The world still roars, but your soul stays quiet. Not because you're avoiding life, but because you've learned how to meet it with awareness, with steadiness, with the kind of strength that doesn't need an audience. You're not triggered, you're trained. You're not reactive. You're responsible for your energy, your choices, your presence. And people notice, not because you're loud, but because you carry something rare, a stillness. No insult can shatter, a calm that doesn't depend on comfort, a clarity that came not from escaping chaos, but from walking through it and coming out unshaken. So when the world tugs at your edges, when the volume rises and chaos begs you to join in, remember this: your strength is not in how loudly you react. It's in how quietly you remain centered. Let them shout. Let life twist you. You were never here to match the storm. You were here to master your calm. If this message speaks to your soul, don't just watch, live it. Like, share, and subscribe to Stoic Capsule to keep building the stillness that holds real power. Thank you for walking this path with us. This is your journal, your journey, and when you're ready to go deeper, we'll be right here, still, focused, free.